In this episode, we're going to focus on something that is easy to overlook when you're learning individual skills like collection, evidence rating, and hypothesis testing. Even when smart people are working hard, teams can still produce weak intelligence if they fall into certain predictable pitfalls. These pitfalls are not usually about someone being careless or unintelligent. They are often about the way work gets organized, the way assumptions spread, and the way pressure pushes people toward shortcuts. In threat intelligence, the danger is that a team can appear productive while quietly drifting away from disciplined reasoning, and that drift can sink the quality of the output. The goal here is to help you recognize these pitfalls early, so you can avoid them and keep your work defensible even when things get noisy. When you understand the traps, you can build habits and team norms that protect the process without slowing it to a crawl. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. One major pitfall is confusing activity with progress, which often happens when teams measure success by how much they collected or how many items they produced. A team can collect thousands of indicators, summarize dozens of reports, and fill pages of notes, and still not answer the requirement that mattered. This happens because the work becomes centered on inputs rather than outcomes. The remedy is to keep the requirement visible in the workflow and to continuously ask whether the latest collection or analysis moves you closer to the decision the audience needs to make. Another part of the remedy is to define what done looks like for a specific task, so you do not keep collecting forever. Beginners often assume more is safer, but more can be a way of avoiding commitment. A team that stays disciplined produces fewer, clearer outputs that are tied to decisions, and that is what makes the work valuable. Another pitfall is overweighting a single strong voice, whether that voice is a senior analyst, a charismatic teammate, or a widely trusted external source. This can create a subtle form of groupthink where people stop challenging assumptions because they assume the confident voice must be right. In intelligence work, confidence is not evidence, and respected people can still be wrong, especially under time pressure. The practical danger is that once a team adopts a shared narrative early, they start collecting and interpreting through that narrative, which reinforces it even if it began as a weak guess. A healthier team habit is to normalize structured disagreement, where alternative hypotheses are not seen as personal criticism, but as part of the analytic process. When teams build a norm of asking what else could it be, the influence of any single voice becomes less risky. This does not slow the team down. It makes the team harder to mislead. A related pitfall is the snowball effect of unverified claims, where a weak statement becomes stronger simply because it gets repeated. Someone reads a rumor in a low-quality report, it gets paraphrased in a chat thread, then it appears in an internal summary, and soon it is treated as established fact. The danger is that repetition creates the feeling of corroboration even when there was never independent evidence. This is especially common when teams are busy and rely on quick summaries rather than reading original artifacts. The fix is to preserve provenance and to distinguish between observation and reporting in your notes and in your speech. When you treat secondhand claims as leads that need confirmation rather than as conclusions, you stop the snowball before it becomes a boulder. Teams that consistently label what they know and where it came from avoid this trap almost automatically. Another pitfall that sinks teams is premature closure, which is the tendency to settle on an explanation too early and stop searching for alternatives. Premature closure can be driven by time pressure, by the desire to provide answers quickly, or by the comfort of having a coherent story. It can also be driven by organizational expectations, where leadership wants a definitive statement even when the evidence is still forming. The harm is that once closure happens, new evidence gets interpreted as minor detail rather than as something that could change the conclusion. A disciplined team builds explicit checkpoints where they pause to ask whether the leading hypothesis is still the best fit and whether alternative explanations have been adequately tested. This can be lightweight, but it must be real, not a ceremonial gesture. If your team is not willing to reopen a conclusion when new evidence arrives, you are essentially freezing your thinking at the moment of maximum uncertainty. The opposite pitfall is analysis paralysis, where teams avoid making any conclusion because they fear being wrong. This can lead to endless collection, endless discussion, and outputs that are so cautious they are unusable. In threat intelligence, you rarely get perfect certainty, so the job is to make the best defensible assessment with the evidence available and to clearly state confidence and unknowns. A team can avoid paralysis by using clear confidence language and by treating conclusions as conditional, meaning true given the current evidence. This allows action without pretending certainty is absolute. It also allows the team to update quickly when new information arrives, because the output was never framed as unchangeable truth. In other words, the antidote to paralysis is not bravado, it is calibrated confidence. Another common team pitfall is mixing roles and responsibilities in a way that creates confusion about what work is actually being done. When collection, processing, analysis, and dissemination blur together, people can duplicate effort, overlook steps, or assume someone else handled a critical task. For beginners, it can feel like everyone is busy, so everything must be covered, but busyness does not guarantee coverage. A disciplined team uses a clear handoff mindset. Even if the team is small, where it is obvious what has been collected, what has been normalized, what has been analyzed, and what remains uncertain. This clarity also makes it easier to review the work later and identify where the process broke down if the conclusion was wrong. It reduces frustration because people stop stepping on each other's toes and start building on each other's work. Strong teams are not just smart, they are organized in a way that preserves reasoning. A subtle pitfall is letting tooling or data availability dictate the analysis, rather than letting the requirement dictate what matters. Teams often lean on the easiest data to obtain, and then they build a story around what they can see, even if it is not the most decision-relevant view. This can create a situation where the team is confident about a narrow slice of the problem, but blind to the parts that actually matter. The remedy is to continually ask what you cannot see and how that affects confidence. It also means being willing to say that a question cannot be fully answered with current visibility, and then recommending steps to improve visibility if that is worth it. A good team does not confuse visibility with reality. They use what they can see as evidence, but they do not pretend it represents the whole world. Another pitfall is treating frameworks, labels, and categories as if they are the work itself. Labels can be helpful for organizing thought, but they can also become a substitute for reasoning. For example, saying something fits a particular tactic does not explain the evidence, and it does not automatically tell you what it means in your environment. Teams sometimes become fluent in labeling and forget to connect labels back to the requirement and to the decision. The fix is to treat labels as indexing tools, not as conclusions. A label should help you find related examples and communicate efficiently, but the actual product is the explanation and its implications. When you keep that distinction, your outputs stay meaningful rather than turning into jargon-heavy summaries. Beginners benefit from this reminder because it prevents them from mistaking vocabulary for understanding. Process drift is another pitfall that can quietly sink teams over time, especially as workload increases. Early on, a team might carefully document context, test hypotheses, and calibrate confidence, but under pressure they start skipping those steps. The output still gets produced, but the quality slowly erodes, and eventually the team becomes known for unreliable assessments. Drift is dangerous because it happens gradually, so it feels normal until a major failure exposes it. The defense against drift is having a few non-negotiable habits, like always preserving provenance, always separating observation from inference, and always stating confidence. These habits act like guardrails that keep the process from sliding too far even when time is short. A team that protects a small set of core disciplines can scale without losing trust. As we conclude, the most important idea is that analytic pitfalls are often predictable, which means they are preventable. Good teams get sunk not because they lack intelligence, but because they let repetition replace corroboration, let confidence replace evidence, let speed replace discipline, or let ambiguity replace clear communication. When you keep requirements central, preserve provenance, test alternative hypotheses, resist premature closure, avoid paralysis with calibrated confidence, and maintain clear roles in the workflow, you create resilience in your analytic process. That resilience matters because threat intelligence work is rarely calm, and under pressure the process will reveal its true strength. By learning to spot and avoid these pitfalls now, you are building habits that will protect your future work and your team's credibility. Next, we'll take this disciplined mindset into a very practical topic by learning how to triage indicators into true intelligence value. Because not every indicator deserves the same attention, and a strong analyst learns how to separate signal from noise quickly and defensively.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.